Hi, I'm Chad Huebener.
And I'm Sara Huebener with Edina Realty. In a recent video, we talked about the possession date term on the purchase agreement. Today, we are going to be talking about the seller's rent back agreement, which is closely related to the possession date. In fact, the two terms, when a rent back is used, the possession date is also edited to reflect the rent back agreement.
So a rent-back agreement is an agreement between the buyer and the seller. Can be done prior to final acceptance in an addendum, or it can be done after final acceptance as an amendment.
To the purchase agreement.
Yep, to the purchase agreement. And it's just an agreement where the seller is going to maintain possession after closing for a specified time. Like we mentioned, possession date, typically that's a couple days or a shorter period of time. A rent back is a little bit longer. And it serves almost as a lease between the buyer and the seller. So the property closes on a specific close date, and the seller maintains possession of the property for whatever is in the agreement. It's typical to a lease. There can be a security deposit, their insurance must be maintained, and there's a specific date, a possession date, and a date where they turn over possession to the property.
To the buyer. Oftentimes when there is a rent back, we will see two final walkthroughs occur on the property. The first occurs right before the buyer goes to the closing table. The next one occurs after the seller actually vacates the property and the buyer is to take possession. Much like a landlord would do a walkthrough on a rental unit, the buyer then does the walkthrough before they take possession to ensure that the seller left the property in substantially the same condition as it was when they closed on the property. When do we see clients use a seller rent back agreement? In years past, we would typically see one or two of them throughout the year. This year, we are seeing a lot more than we typically would. We're seeing it to become a much more common request among sellers wanting buyers to issue a rent back. A lot of that is due to the low housing supply, and you may say, well, what does that have to do with a rent back? Well, with the low housing supply, when a seller is able to find a home that they want to purchase, a lot of times it's very difficult to line the closings up. We see that most often in corporate relocation transfers out of state. We see it whenever we have
New construction. Yep.
So where that new construction date is kind of floating within a 1 month time period. It's just an opportunity for a seller to try to know where they are going to be residing versus living in a hotel for 2 weeks or 3 weeks while they are wrapping up the finer details of their next location.
Yep, and we've seen more of these this year, just due to it being primarily a seller's market, and just some more flexibility for a seller, and then a buyer. This is something that they could add to a purchase agreement to help a seller out to make their offer look a little bit better.
Yeah, and we also definitely would see this in cases where a buyer has a high degree of flexibility. In a case where a buyer does not have a high degree of flexibility, it's going to be much more difficult for a seller to get a rent back. But we are seeing more and more of them this year.
Yeah, and just like every other addendum and amendment that we work with as agents and professionals, there are items that we recommend adding some certain language for both sides. If you're a seller or a buyer, we'd be more than happy to expand on any of that if you had any specific questions about rent back in your situation.
If we can answer any other questions, feel free to drop us a line. Thanks for watching our video and have a great day.